Hello and welcome to the third and final episode of our 3 Things to Consider for 2020 series here on Simply Tax. On the podcast today, we're covering a topic that again at first blush may seem to only apply to the not-for-profit space, but in my experience is need-to-know insight for most businesses, their owners, and their advisors, and that's building and sustaining strong not-for-profit boards. Here's why. First, many businesses have or can benefit from a board of directors, and the best practices that our guest will share today apply in that context as well. And second, and perhaps more directly related, is that many of the businesses and owners that I work with are passionate about giving back to the community, and they are often asked to join not-for-profit boards. But since many don't have experience working for a not-for-profit organization, they don't really know what being a board member entails, what they're signing up for, or what a great board member looks like. And that's why I'm excited to share with you on the podcast today a conversation I had with BKD's Dan Prater, where we cover why boards are important, the roles that board members serve, important questions to ask when considering joining a board, and the best practices of the best organizations and boards. Let's dive in.
Simply Tax.
I'm Dan Prater. My title is Senior Managing Consultant of Nonprofit Excellence. I come back, I tease that my life is really 2 segments. I've spent about 12 years in higher ed, actually teaching about nonprofit leadership, organizational leadership, and spent about 20 years in nonprofits, ranging from mostly social service agencies, the type that are domestic violence, child abuse, poverty, from very large organizations to those who had maybe 5 or 6 employees.
Good wide background to start from, and today we're talking about the strength of boards and the importance of boards, and I know that probably goes without saying almost to a certain extent to say that a board's important, but maybe why are boards so important to organizations?
Yeah. Well, most organizations are started, I tease, they're kitchen top organizations. Somebody's sitting around talking, and what happens though is as they evolve, they have to bring friends and partners and families and community members around them. So boards are a natural evolution in that they provide the strength and support. One of the main things they do is help keep the organization focused and on mission. But they're sort of a protector in that they provide accountability. So they're going to provide accountability to make sure that the organization is actually doing what it's supposed to do. It's accountable to the people they serve as well as to the people who donate to the organization. And they're that important link between internal people and the work they're doing and the community as a whole. So board members do a very important function, but primarily it's setting the mission and the vision and making sure the organization is accountable.
So maybe what are the ways or the roles that the board can play in doing that?
Well, one of the easiest things I break it down into 5 areas. So of course, the want, we have board members who have the passion, but one of the things they do is they move the organization into new circles. So if you have a group of people who are very set on a cause, sometimes they become myopic, and the board can actually open doors within a community and maybe new circles, exposing people who normally would never have known or understood the organization. They take those people out and bring them into the circles. So as an example, work with poverty, so you have people who've never even been in a Title I school, don't even know what it is, but they care about the community. So a board member might help them move into a program or go into a school and see work that they had never seen before. So in a sense, it exposes new levels and helps them do that. But beyond that, one of the important roles of being on a board is bringing a higher level of professionalism. Now, that's not to say that organizations aren't professional, but sometimes you find that people who are deeply passionate may not be focused on the business acumen side. So board members often come in with a higher level of business experience and connections, and they can help bring that to the organization to sort of rise them to a new level.
So you mentioned kind of maybe bringing a different perspective. So then there's probably considerations, I would guess, for somebody that's maybe a newer board member or for boards to be thinking about. What are some of those?
Well, I have evolved my thinking over the years about boards. And by the way, I sit on lots of boards myself, so I'm speaking both as a board member and as a person who trains boards. I see the pain and the fun on both sides.
Sure.
One of the things we want new board members to do, and this falls as a responsibility for both board members and as the organization, is the lines often get fuzzy on what do I do as a board member. So I love puppies, so I want to go in and I just want to help everybody and I'm in there every day. No. Now,
Yeah.
we want board members to understand the parameters very quickly and to understand their role. And the general role of a board member is going to be governance, and governance at a higher level, not in the organization working day to day. One of the and this is a danger if you have board members who want to go in and start running things. We hire smart people to run the organization. Board members set the broad vision, the mission, the guide, the parameters, and they develop policies and procedures. And then they hire smart people and they get out of the way and let those people do that.
Yeah.
So that's one of the flaws of young board members, sometimes newer board members, is they want to go in and start doing. And we want their passion and we want their engagement, but we don't want them to get to a point where they're actually doing the work.
I would think that coming into the organization, right, you just out of a want to help, that's maybe not all that uncommon to maybe have that and to try to attain that. So what are some of the, maybe if characteristics is the right word, of a strong board and those members in terms of maybe focusing on the governance? What are the things that they should be focusing on?
Yeah. Well, first of all, one of the principal roles of being on a board is establishing proper bylaws, policies, and procedures. So when I referred to parameters earlier, this is what I mean, is establishing the parameters of the organization. And of course, that goes back even further on strategic planning, which is one of the board's roles, is to establish clear mission, vision, values, measurable outcomes, and then just to oversee those, to make sure they're being carried out, but not to go in and do that. So very early, we want boards to, one of the key things right away is the job description of a board member. We want people to know before they even join a board what's expected of them to be on the board, and then the board officers have to hold the other board members accountable. So if I'm board president and you're on my board, I'm going to actually oversee you somewhat to make sure you're not getting involved in things you shouldn't, or if you aren't engaged, to make sure you become engaged. The board polices the board, so that's one of the chief roles. But a good board, again, is establishing these parameters, these governance, these policies, and compliance is a big part of that. We have to know the law. We have to make sure we're following the law, because when you're a board member, you are a legal officer of the organization. When things don't go well, even if you didn't formally approve it, you're responsible. So we want board members to understand and have clarity, number one, before they join a board, number two, to make sure they're fully committed and willing to do it, and then number three, once they're in, to make sure they're actually doing it.
Yeah.
So a lot of the board work is actually policing the board.
And I guess I never really thought of that perspective. That is interesting, but very important to be operating at that high level. And it seems like the sky's the limit almost in terms of what maybe you can get distracted addressing all those sorts of things. So it seems like maybe an approach to doing it, or maybe being systematic about it, is kind of a way to go. Would you agree with that? And how, basically boards can get stronger and make sure they're doing the right things and focusing on the governance piece that you're talking about?
Well, first of all, let me back up a little bit to answer your question and say this. All organizations go through life cycles, through stages. So the board that your startup organization needs is not the same organization that a more mature organization needs. The board that your organization with 1.5 employees needs is not the same board that the one with 50 employees or 5,000 employees needs. And I think that has to be clarified when you're talking about a board. It's not a template that everybody fits, right? But there are best practices, and one of those best practices, and I would say this, if I'm a board member, one of the key questions I need to ask myself is, what kind of a board member does this organization need for me to be? That's really important to understand that. So when I'm recruiting, I'm going to actually find the kind of board member I need. Not any warm-blooded person will do.
Right.
And we want organizations to be picky. Not just anybody who walks in is going to do. We don't just throw it out on Facebook or on social media and say, we're desperate for somebody. Would you come and be on our board? We're going to be very selective. But then we're also going to make sure that one of the key roles, again, of being on a board is for the board to continually ask the question, are we relevant? Are we relevant? In other words, we know that when this thing was started in 1975, we really were good at doing this thing. But in truth, does that method still work? And are we holding the organization back by not being relevant? And if we aren't relevant, what are the things we should do? So one of the things good boards do is they constantly go back and revisit not only their mission and vision, but their methodology. So I have lots of examples of organizations who used to do things. Like one of them actually was a print company and helped people by printing stuff. Well, that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Or the March of Dimes, who started out to eradicate polio, but if they didn't change their methodology, they were irrelevant. So good boards are always asking that question. And the way they do that is they have strategic planning, and they are constantly analyzing their work and the way it's being done and their effectiveness. If they don't do that, they fall into a trap of antiquity and they become irrelevant.
What are ways, I guess, that a board can be thinking of those things? Because relevance is something that sneaks up on you, obviously, right? A lot of times you talk about like in printing, that didn't just happen overnight. There's a series of progression, right, of what got to it. So it maybe speaks to this point of being in the right lane as a board member, of focusing on the governance, bringing out the outsider's perspective. But what are the things to be watching for a board and for board members to be focusing on relevance?
It all fits together like this.
Yeah.
It's all a glove. So one of the things you do is you have consistent accountability. And the way you have accountability is you ask yourself, is what we're doing working? Is it the most effective and efficient way? And how do we know it's working? So one of the ways we know is we listen. So good boards are always listening. They do internal analysis. So you can do board surveys. How are we doing? Are you happy as a board member? But we also listen externally, and this is very important. I actually have some groups I work with, and every year they hire me to come in. I do focus groups. So I ask the people they serve, do you like what we're doing? Is this effective? Does this really help you? Are there things that we could do better? But I also ask other stakeholders. I ask other nonprofits in the community, do you like the way we interact with you? Is there something we do that you wish we wouldn't do? Is there something we could do more effective on referring clients back and forth to each other? Are we good community partners? And then we do a higher level where we ask community leadership, maybe bank presidents, school superintendents, chief of police, and we ask them, do you believe this organization is helping meet the needs of this community and moving us forward so we can be a strong, thriving community? Are there things that we aren't doing that you wish we would start doing that align with our mission? Are there things we're doing you wish we would stop doing? And then tell me about good experiences and bad experiences. And we do this every year. And of course, the organizations are never part of it. And we do a lot of surveys. And then what happens is I bring all that data back to the board, and they look at it and they go, wow, we've learned a lot. We're being accountable, and now we're actually going to listen and respond based on that. Yeah. So as they form their mission, their vision, their programs, and their services, they're not doing it with just what we like. They're actually saying, we believe that we're being the best organization we can be for this community.
Yeah, not in a vacuum, right? And really just kind of you have the focus. You know your organization or the organization, the board that you're serving on, but thinking about the other perspectives is so important in the end user. So you mentioned about not just any warm-blooded person being on the board, right? I like how you say that, because I feel like there's this struggle sometimes with getting people to be on board. Sometimes you have vacancies and trying to fill them, and how do you go about recruiting and retaining, and how long should someone be on a board? Those sorts of issues that maybe if not properly addressed can present challenges.
Yeah. Well, first of all of those things should be written into your bylaws.
Okay.
It shouldn't be just what you feel for the moment. You should have clear bylaws. I like term limits, and I'll tell you why. Because term limits ensures that you continually bring in fresh ideas and fresh perspectives. You don't want your board to be like the Supreme Court, and you're on it till you die. I mean, you want fresh ideas coming in. And you also don't want people who've been on the board 20, 25 years. That's not fresh for your organization. You need ideas and new people, new blood coming in.
Right.
Part of this, too, I believe, is you want organizations to make sure that one of the ways to do it is set up a matrix and say, what kind of types of people do we need on our board? So if you do healthcare, you might say, we ought to have representatives from the healthcare systems on our board. We ought to have people who are within the communities where we serve. I joke about this, but I know organizations who serve, say, African Americans in poverty, and they have all Caucasian boards.
Yeah.
That's probably not smart.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So we want diversity on our board. We want representation. And we want geographic representation. So if we serve the entire Midwest, we don't want everybody to be from one little region on our board. We want to have representation and voices from all over those areas. So I would encourage organizations to put together a matrix. First of all, what kinds of people do we need? What skill sets do we need? Who do we have now? And what's missing? And then go after them.
Yeah.
But remember, and if you ask smart people to be on your board, they won't even consider it unless you've clearly outlined the expectations. How many times do we meet? What's the expectation? How many hours? Fundraising involved? What's involved? And then they'll look at it. Because if you don't clearly know what you expect them to do, how will you know if they're actually doing the work?
Good question.
I mean,
right?
really, there's
Yeah.
no accountability. So
Right.
it all goes back to holding each other accountable, because our work is too important just to hope things fall together.
Yeah.
I mean, we're passionate about this, but we're going to do it with excellence. I call this, we want compassion, but we want intellectual compassion.
I like that term, intellectual compassion, because right, it has to go with the all of everything else getting, I guess, rowing the same direction, getting everybody going the same direction to be able to accomplish great things. So sometimes diversity is an issue that comes up of maybe a challenge. What do you say to an organization that maybe is facing that sort of a challenge? Because again, with the relevance and the perspectives and all that, if you don't have that diverse input on the board, then how are you possibly going to be able to do that and accomplish that? How do you, if you're struggling to, again, recruit those people that have different viewpoints or from different areas, or how do you go about doing that if you're struggling with that?
Well, first of all, I believe diversity is intentional. It doesn't just happen.
Okay.
You have to say, we need people with different viewpoints on our board. And diversity is not just obviously race or ethnicity. It's also age.
Yeah.
Too many boards have men my age on them, and that's not all bad, but it's not all good. And I'll give you a quick example. I sit on a regional YMCA board, and we have centers in 10 different cities. And it's been mostly people who look and sound just like me. We have a young man who's on our board, and he's an African-American young man, and he's a little younger than most of us, but a couple of months ago, we were talking about what are some things we could do to get some more young folks in our Y centers. And he quietly raised his hand, and he said, I have an idea. And everybody turns around and looks at him, and he said, we ought to start playing video games. And he starts describing this video game, and I'm like, that's the last thing we need to do is play video games, right? But the more he talked, he was saying, yeah, this game is really hot right now. We could project it on the wall. The kids could play it. Then we could go into the gym and act it out. And the more he talked, these light bulbs started coming on. And everybody's like, that is brilliant.
Yeah.
Without diversity in age and his background, he was actually a former NBA player. But without that diversity, none of us would have ever thought of that.
Yeah.
And I even come from the university perspective. Most of the people that I've worked with are in their 20s and early 30s, and they come up with ideas, and a lot of times I'm like, But the more you listen and you start implementing these ideas, you're like, that is brilliant. I never, ever would have thought like that.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to do. We want to bring a diversity of thought into the boardroom. So it's not just the same old thing, the same old people trying the same ways over and over. So develop a matrix and then be proactive. Go out and seek people. You don't know until you ask, right?
Well, I think it's also, you mentioned the benefits to the organization and the board of having things defined, the role defined, because then you know if somebody's successful in that position or not, right? But it also, I would assume on the recruiting front that's also helpful, because I know if you were going to, we were talking about, hey, can you come and join this board? And, you talk about the not having the time and all of that defined. I mean, I would be hesitant just from what am I getting myself into, right?
Exactly.
And knowing whether or not I can accept that responsibility. So that seems like that would be helpful.
Well, it also tells me something about their organization, if they're organized and their thinking and their process. And if I don't think that, and I'm a big believer in this, organization isn't the warm and fuzzy, but it sure sets you up for success better. So if you're organized, you know what you're doing, you know how you're going to do it. If I look into the window and I see that, I believe there's a greater chance that I could contribute and that it will result in success. And by the way, donors feel the same way.
Sure.
As a board member, if I'm trying to help bring in funds to the organization, if we have our act together, we're structured, we have a theory of change, we know how this thing works, why we're going to do it. If I show you as a donor that, you have a lot more confidence in investing into that work than if you do if we say, well, we're just good people doing good work every day. Not good enough.
Right.
So again, all these pieces fit together and they lead to success.
Yeah. And you talk about some of the relevance and the differentiating factors, and that's probably one of them, because anymore I feel like there's a lot of great organizations out there that are doing fantastic things, but then after a while you almost kind of start to sound similar and the same, and there's only so many dollars and time that can be volunteered and given to different organizations, so you kind of have to differentiate yourself, I would think. Yeah. Well,
I'm big on the social return on the SROI.
Okay.
And if you cannot prove to me, and I joke, and I know not everybody likes the Gates Foundation and Microsoft, but nobody has given more money than the Gates folks. And they changed philanthropy a few years ago in that they said, we're going to just stop giving away money to do-gooders. We're going to give money away to organizations that can prove the need is real. It's not just hearsay or anecdotal information. Yeah. Number two, they have a research-based method for addressing this issue. And number three, they know how to measure the outcomes and report them back. If you show me that, then I'll give to you. And other major givers in the United States, like, yep, you're right, and they followed suit.
Yeah.
So now organizations must think like that as well. So board members, all stakeholders are saying, can you show me how this thing really works? And if you can show me, I have confidence that I want to give and be part of the work. That if you can't show me, I think you're just operating on warm and fuzzy, and I don't think you really know if it works or not. And so that's part of attracting smart people to your organization. They see these things, from the smallest of things to the bigger things, to say, I really want to be part of that work. You're moving the needle on this cause, and I'm excited about that. I want to join you. Yeah. That if you're just a bunch of do-gooders who are in there every day muddling around hoping things fall out of the sky, I don't want to be part of your organization.
Yeah.
And this is what moves an organization from a grassroots mom and pop shop to a thriving organization that's really changing the community.
It sounds simple, but executing on it, I assume, is the challenge. So I don't know any best practices of seeing the organizations that have maybe made some of those changes and really strengthened. I mean, you've talked about some very specific things that can be implemented, but if there's kind of one or two things to focus on and say, okay, this is where we're going to start and this is what we're going to do, what would you say?
Well, I keep going back to strategic planning.
Yeah.
And here's why. If we bring, and by the way, don't do strategic planning yourself, because then you're going to repeat the same old things over and over. You must bring in an expert from the outside, someone who really understands this, to help you come up with an aspirational vision, to help you develop a path to actually succeed, to reach that. And then you have the task in front of you to say, now we know what we're going to do. We have the clear steps to do it. Now let's get to work. And that starts with the board. So part of this is the board understands their role, and then they have a charge to pass that on, to implement it to the staff and the people who do the work, but to go out into the community, to bring other people who share that passion, and to be the conduit between the broader community and the organization. The board is the foundation of the organization. If the board is crooked, and I don't mean thieves or robbers, but I mean not straight. If it's busted and it's not working, you can build on that house all day long, and that is never going to be a strong organization. The problem is too many organizations focus on the walls or the crack in the wall, but they won't address the real issue, which is they have the wrong people on the board, and it is not going to move forward until they get the right people on the board. So it's going to take someone with some courage to say, we have to get the right people on the board, and we're going to have to take the right steps to do the right things. See, a lot of organizations want to go out and start doing fundraising and these things right away. That's like step 5.
Yeah.
You're going to have to build your foundation first, get the right people in there, then you can build your house. But don't start on the roof until you have the foundation ready.
I like that metaphor, because you're right. There's a lot of steps that are involved in that. And if you're dealing with one that you skip those steps and you have a kind of a crack in the foundation, I mean, those are difficult conversations to have to say, well, we need to, like you said, it's going to take some courage to maybe ask get people on the right seats on the bus, or maybe ask them to leave the bus potentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you're a board member, you must be the guardian of the mission, and you won't let anything get in the way of that mission. No personal agendas, no drama.
Yeah.
It's always about the mission first, and anything that gets in the way, you're going to deal with it. Now, you may be able to deal with it and fix it, or you may actually have to remove that barrier and move forward. But the mission, the people we serve, the cause we're doing, always comes first. If it doesn't, we need to ask ourselves, should we still be on the board?
Yeah.
But just, as far as best practices, structure, bylaws, policies, and procedures, they're not the romantic, sexy part of the work, but they are what will make you a strong, thriving organization and set you up for success to do the work you really want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess anything we haven't covered so far, I mean, this is such a fascinating topic. I feel like I would love to just sit around and talk about it all day, honestly, because I feel like you've got probably so many, you've seen so much and you've observed so much, and that you can really add a lot of value from that perspective. But yeah, anything we haven't covered so far that you think would be just really great advice for someone that's looking to strengthen their board?
Most organizations, if not all, are based on usually one person's passion. So this is the founder. One of the things I see over and over, almost daily, are founders who won't move forward and let go. So founders bring their friends and family around. So Damien, I like your idea. Sure, I'll be on your board. But in time as they grow, those friends and family can be a hindrance.
Yeah.
So I encourage organizations to move beyond that. And at some point, the founder has to let go. It's no longer just about your passion. If you're going to thrive and grow, it becomes broader and bigger than you. And this is a danger I see over and over again, as organizations could be 20, 25 years old, and everybody's still saying, well, we just want to do what you like and what makes you happy.
Yeah.
So don't get caught up into that syndrome. Tradition is good, but tradition can drive you into oblivion. So if we're accountable, you're going to have a board who's always focused on the people we serve and the mission. And sometimes that means even moving away from the founder, and even in some cases, moving the founder off the organization. So that's a very awkward thing. There's a stage from the infancy to the toddler to the adolescent where we have to ask the founder to let go. It's not just about you anymore. That's just a common issue I see, and I suspect a lot of the people even listening to this today understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And they don't want to hurt someone's feelings, so I guess the question is which one's most important? The founder and the founder's feelings, or the people you serve and the mission that you're trying to accomplish?
Wow. Very impactful.
Yeah.
Makes it a little easier to put into context when you put it that way. So
yeah.
Where can people learn more about this topic, and I guess more from you?
So I would encourage someone to contact me. I'd be happy to email you and talk about it. We can do an analysis, and we can do an open consultation to kind of see where you are and what you want. If I could just say one thing to organizations, allocate the time and resources to do this right. If you're not going to do this right, get out of it. And I mean, the people who are counting on your services need you to do it with excellence, need you to do it with expertise. And if you're not going to do it with excellence and expertise, can I just say, get out of the work and let someone else do it? Whether you're educating people, you're providing health care, you're protecting the environment, you're helping immigrants, whatever that is, do it with excellence. So give me a call. I absolutely would love to talk to you and see what we can do to help you. Everything from board governance to strategic planning to fundraising, communication, developing your message. These are all areas that we have expertise in, and we can help organizations, again, whether you're grassroots or you're a stronger, larger organization.
So, what'd you think of our 3 things to keep in mind for 2020? Did we miss any? Anything that you'd like to hear more on? Let us know by dropping us an email at simplytax@bkd.com. You can learn more about Dan, how to contact him, and get additional resources for not-for-profits, their boards, and board members in the show notes of this episode, which are available at bkd.com/simplytax. And finally, if you haven't already, I'd really enjoy connecting with you on social media. You can find me out on Twitter, where I tweet about tax at Damien Martin CPA. On Instagram, where I post about my life at the intersection of tax and being a dad at TaxDad. On YouTube by subscribing to our Simply Tax YouTube channel, and out on LinkedIn. I'm Damien Martin, and thank you for listening.
The information contained in this episode of Simply Tax is based on data available as of the date of its release. BKD is under no obligation to update this information if changes occur. Applying this information to your specific situation requires careful consideration of all facts and circumstances. Any information provided is not to be considered as tax, legal, or financial advice. Please consult your tax advisor before acting on any matters covered.